Okay, you're not going to believe this one. We're looking at a situation where a federal judge has basically thrown down the gauntlet to a former presidential administration.
Yeah, it really does sound like something out of a movie, doesn't it?
It does, but it's real. And it's all tied up with some uh, pretty significant actions taken regarding Venezuelan migrants during the Trump administration.
Exactly. We're diving deep into this legal clash, this tug of war that really kicked off when the administration decided to use this very, very old law.
The Alien Enemies Act
Yeah,
from like 1798.
that's the one, 1798. A wartime law, basically. And now a federal judge is seriously questioning how it was applied here.
Right. And to get our heads around it and help everyone listening get theirs around it too, we've been looking at a detailed report from CBS News. It really lays out the judge's findings pretty clearly.
Mm-hmm. So our mission today, you could say, is to unpack this whole legal showdown. Why does it matter? What's really at stake? And what does it reveal about how power actually works or maybe doesn't work between the branches of government?
Yeah, exactly. So whether you've heard bits and pieces about this or if this is the first time it's hitting your radar, don't worry. We're going to break it all down, try to make it easy to follow. We'll hit the key points, why they're important.
Sounds good. Let's get into it.
Okay, so the backstory. What exactly happened? What did the Trump administration do to trigger all of this?
So it really centers around this proclamation President Trump issued back in March. He invoked the Alien Enemies Act.
Okay.
Now, like we said, this law is ancient, 1798, designed for declared wars. The administration's argument was that these specific Venezuelan migrants were members of the Trendiaragua gang.
Ah, okay. The gang affiliation was the hook.
That was the justification they used. They framed it as a national security issue, allowing them to use this wartime act to try and deport these individuals very quickly, bypassing some of the usual immigration processes.
Using a wartime act for migrants.
Mm.
That sounds like a pretty controversial move right off the bat. So how did it end up in court?
Well, the migrants themselves challenged it. They argued they weren't alien enemies under the meaning of the act and that the process was flawed. Their case landed in front of U.S. District Judge James Boasberg in D.C.
And what was his initial reaction? Did he just dismiss it?
Oh, definitely not. He reacted pretty quickly, actually. He issued an order, a temporary restraining order, basically telling the Trump administration to hold off.
Hold off on deporting them.
Specifically, hold off on deporting these particular migrants under the Alien Enemies Act. He put a 14-day pause on it. Think of it like hitting the brakes to give the court some time to actually examine the arguments properly.
Okay, a 14-day pause. That seems reasonable, gives everyone a chance to breathe. But it sounds like there was more to it than just the written order.
Yeah, there was. He also held an emergency hearing. And according to that CBS News report, he was very direct with the government lawyers.
How so?
He told them point blank, any of the migrants covered by this order who were already on planes heading to El Salvador needed to be brought back, turned around, sent back to the U.S.
Wow, okay. So not just stop future deportations, but reverse the ones in progress.
Exactly. And he backed that up with a formal written order, too, just to make it absolutely clear. No deportations under this specific act for the people currently in custody who were subject to that proclamation. It's important, though, this was only about the Alien Enemies Act deportations, not necessarily other immigration enforcement.
Got it. So the judge makes his instructions very clear, verbally and in writing. Stop these specific deportations now. Bring back anyone en route. But this is where the story takes a turn, right? The report suggests the government didn't exactly follow those instructions.
That's precisely what Judge Boasberg found. He concluded that even after his explicit orders, the removals continued.
Continued?
Yeah. The CBS report says planes carrying these Venezuelan migrants, the ones subject to his order, actually landed in El Salvador, and most of them were then moved to this high-security prison there, CECOT, the Center for Terrorism Confinement.
Wait a second. The judge says stop, bring them back, and they land anyway and get transferred to a prison in another country? That feels like defying a court order.
That's exactly how Judge Boasberg saw it. It's a huge deal in the legal world. He didn't just see it that way, he acted on it.
What did he do?
He issued a finding of probable cause to hold the Trump administration in criminal contempt of court.
Criminal contempt. That sounds serious.
It is extremely serious. He used the phrase willful disregard of his order. He wrote in his decision that he didn't make this finding lightly, that he'd given the government multiple chances to explain what happened or, fix it, but he found their responses totally inadequate.
Willful disregard. He believed they knew about the order and ignored it anyway.
That's the implication, yes. Because the actions happened after he gave both verbal and written instructions. It suggested, to him at least, an intentional choice to disobey.
And he connected this to the Constitution, didn't he?
He absolutely did. He stated very clearly something like, the Constitution does not tolerate willful disobedience of judicial orders, especially by officials of a coordinate branch who have sworn an oath to uphold it.
Wow.
Yeah, that's a direct shot. It really cuts to the core principles, rule of law, separation of powers, the idea that no one, not even the executive branch, is above the law or can just ignore a court order.
So, if the planes kept going, who actually gave that order? Did the judge figure that out? It seems like someone had to say, keep going.
That's still murky, actually, and Judge Boasberg himself pointed that out. It's a key part of the puzzle.
Because no one knows.
Well, during one of the hearings, a lawyer from the Justice Department mentioned names of officials at DHS, the Department of Homeland Security, and the State Department as sort of points of contact after the judge's order came down.
Okay, so they knew who was involved generally.
Right, but the lawyer claimed they didn't know who specifically gave the final green light for the planes to continue to El Salvador despite the judge's order.
Sounds a bit like passing the buck, maybe. Was the judge satisfied with that explanation?
Not even slightly. He expressed clear frustration. He used terms like increasing obstructionism and stonewalling to describe the administration's responses.
Obstructionism.
Strong words.
Very. He felt they were deliberately avoiding answering basic questions, like confirming if people deported only under this Alien Enemies Act were actually transferred out of U.S. custody after his order was in place.
So he felt like he was just hitting a wall trying to get simple facts.
Exactly. He mentioned something about the government failing to just, admit to a grave mistake, explain how it transpired, and detail plans to rectify it.
And didn't he also mention some public comments from officials that seemed to almost brag about ignoring him?
Yes, that was another striking part. He specifically referenced boasts his word by the then Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, and also by Salvadoran President Nayib Bukele.
Boasts.
Yeah. Judge Boasberg wrote that their public statements intimated that they had defied the court's order deliberately and gleefully. Wow. Deliberately and gleefully defying a federal judge. That's quite something.
It adds another layer, suggesting maybe this wasn't just bureaucratic confusion, but potentially something more intentional, at least in the judge's view, based on those comments.
Okay, so this is all focused on Boasberg's order and the alleged defiance. But the Supreme Court did get involved later on the broader issue of using the Alien Enemies Act itself, right? How did that fit in?
That's right. The bigger legal question about using the act went up the chain. The Supreme Court eventually ruled that the Trump administration could resume deportations of alleged Tren de Aragua members under the Alien Enemies Act.
Ah, so they sided with the administration on that.
Well, yes and no. They said they could resume them, and this is crucial only if the migrants were given due process first.
Due process, okay.
And the court also specified where any future legal challenges to those removals should happen. They said challenges should be filed as habeas petitions, basically arguing unlawful detention in the federal districts where the migrants were actually being held, likely Texas, given the circumstances.
So the Supreme Court set some ground rules for future deportations under the Act and said challenges belong elsewhere. Did that ruling affect Judge Boasberg's investigation into the contempt issue? Did it make it go away?
Nope. Judge Boasberg was very clear on this point. He explicitly stated that the Supreme Court's order about future deportations, quote, does not affect, let alone moot, the compliance inquiry presently teed up here.
So his focus remained on, was my specific order about those specific flights back in March ignored?
Exactly. Two separate issues in his view. The Supreme Court addressed the future use of the act. He was addressing the alleged past defiance of his direct order.
It also sounds like the administration tried to block him from getting information using state secrets. Is that right?
Yes, they invoked the state secrets privilege. They argued that providing information about the flights could harm national security or foreign relations.
State secrets for flight details. How did the judge react to that?
He was pretty skeptical, to say the least. He basically said, look, I'm not asking for, sensitive diplomatic cables or intelligence assessments. He pointed out he was just asking for basic operational facts. How many people were on the planes? Were they all subject only to the Alien Enemies Act deportation order? When exactly were they transferred from U.S. custody to Salvadoran custody?
Seems reasonable.
That's what he thought. He said he was skeptical that such information rises to the level of a state secret. It wasn't about the why or the diplomacy, just the what and when regarding compliance with his order.
Did the administration have any other arguments? Like maybe arguing his initial order was wrong in the first place?
They did try that angle too. They argued his initial temporary restraining order interfered too much with presidential authority over immigration and foreign affairs.
Yeah.
Judge Boasberg pushed back firmly on that as well. He essentially said, courts place limits on executive actions all the time. That's part of the checks and balances system. His order was within that power.
Makes sense.
And critically, he added that even if, hypothetically, his initial order had somehow been an overreach of his power, that still wouldn't excuse ignoring it once it was issued. You can't just decide a court order is wrong and disobey it. You have to challenge it through the proper legal channels. Defiance itself can still lead to contempt.
Okay, so he shut down that argument too.
Yeah.
Where does that leave things now? What are the concrete next steps in this potential contempt case?
Judge Boasberg has made his intentions crystal clear. He is determined to find out who gave the order for those flights to proceed to El Salvador after his directive to stop.
How is he planning to do that?
Through further court proceedings, he specifically mentioned the possibility of requiring live witness testimony. People would have to come to court under oath and explain what happened and who gave the orders.
Wow, officials testifying under oath about defying a court order. That could be explosive.
Potentially, yes. And he added another layer. He stated that if the Trump administration itself, through the Justice Department, doesn't move forward with prosecuting this criminal contempt finding,
Then what?
then he will appoint someone else, like a special prosecutor, to handle the prosecution.
A judge appointing a prosecutor because the administration won't prosecute itself for contempt against that same
Right.
judge's order. That's unusual.
This is a very strong signal. It shows how seriously he views the alleged defiance of his authority and the importance of upholding the power of the judiciary. He's basically saying, this issue won't just fade away. Someone will be held accountable for answering these questions.
So, wrapping this all up then, the bottom line is, a sitting federal judge has found probable cause, a serious reason to believe that the previous presidential administration committed criminal contempt of court.
That's the core of it. Specifically, by allegedly ignoring a direct order related to the deportation of certain Venezuelan migrants under this very old, seldom used Alien Enemies Act.
And the significance here is pretty huge, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. This isn't just a minor legal spat. It touches on fundamental questions about our whole system of government, separation of powers, the rule of law. I mean, what happens if court orders can just be ignored? It raises questions about accountability.
Yeah, it really puts a spotlight on the tensions that can exist between the different branches of government. Hopefully diving into the details like this gives everyone listening a clear understanding of this complex legal and political situation that's still unfolding.
Definitely. And, it leaves you with some pretty big questions to chew on. What does this kind of conflict really say about the health of our democracy right now when government actions face these kinds of challenges from the judiciary?
Right.
And maybe think about the long-term impact. What does it mean for the authority of the courts if their orders face such direct challenges? It might even be interesting for folks to, look up that Alien Enemies Act of 1798, see what it actually says, or read a bit more about what criminal contempt of court really entails legally. It adds a lot of context.
Good point. Definitely food for thought.